Talent Agenda webinar. Today we will be focusing on the future of work and 2024 talent trends. Thank you for joining us and for making time on this Thursday morning. Today I'm joined by two of our panelists, and I'll just hand over to them to introduce themselves, and then we can get into the webinar. So Krishan, we'll start with you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Krishan Diljro. So I'm originally from Mauritius, and I've been a consultant now with Willis Towers Watson for about 4 years. I'm specialized mainly in the employee experience and organization design space. I'm based in the Dubai office, and we actually in this particular region also service clients in the Middle East and Africa region. So prior to this, I was an HR practitioner for about 17 years back in Mauritius. And I spent quite a bit of time working with HR teams, leading and building HR teams in large organizations in different sectors. I've also in the past had the opportunity to work on projects in Kenya, in Uganda, Tanzania, Botswana. So I'm quite familiar, I would say, with mostly the East Africa region. And so welcome and looking forward to the session.
Super.
Great, thank you, Krishan. Gabriel?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Gab Umodin. I am a marketing leader with over 10 years of experience across finance, e-commerce, multimedia technology, and now recruitment and talent development. I started off in strategy, funny enough, at the First Bank of Nigeria. I helped them transform from a regional structure to a business unit focused structure. Then I moved over to Konga Online, which is an online retail platform in Nigeria, the first in Nigeria, and I helped raise that and make that a local brand name in the country. And I moved over to Suburban Fiber, where I helped roll out fiber to the home across homes in Nigeria, which is quite an ambitious project. And right now, I'm with the African Talent Company, and we own a group of recruitment companies across Africa where we work together to solve this talent gap in Africa with unique and homegrown solutions. Personally, I'm very passionate about creating frameworks that help people grow. I like to also help people and businesses achieve peak performance. And on the side, I love to coach, I love to mentor, give out advice, even if it's not solicited. And I'm very happy to be on this webinar.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Tadi. I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at Global Career Company, or as most of you may know it, Careers in Africa. I'm here just to share our insights as well from the past year, given that we work with over 950 companies across Africa, to share what we've learned through various markets, through various sectors, as well as working with professionals from early careers and graduates right up to the C-suite level. So it would be good to share our insights and also get the expert insights from Krishan and Gabriel as well. So just jumping into our first question, what has 2023 taught us about HR and talent? I'll leave it up to you both to decide who would like to go first on that one.
Christian, do you want to?
Okay, I'll go first. Well, I think just before we get into kind of the question, let us maybe just take a step back. And from our perspective, when we look at employee experience at Willis Towers Watson, we typically use what we call the four pillars of employee experience. So these four pillars are, so firstly the why, which is the purpose, the who, the people that you work with, the relationships that you build at work, the how, which is the actual work that you do, and even how and where you work, and then the last one is the what, what's in it for me. So these are kind of the four pillars that we look at. So if we look at this from the employee perspective, what the last few years and 2023 have taught us. I think from the employee's perspective, the who, like the people that you've been working with and relationships, have more or less remained constant over time, even over the last 3 years. I don't think there has been significant shifts there. Where we have seen dramatic shifts in the other three pillars: the why, the how, and the what. I think a lot of people have gone through redefining purpose, why they work, why they should work, how they do that, where they do that, and what's in it for me. And when we talk about, I think the how and the what, in particular, the new way, we talk about the new ways of working. So we've seen a lot more flexibility, flexible models, hybrid models, more and more technology in the workplace, not just collaboration tools, but even in the workplace in terms of automation. A lot of jobs are now changing because of automation. I think this is how has been happening over the last 3 years, and 2023 I think has been pretty accelerated in that space, because we've probably had the only full year where there was no lockdown, because we still, to some extent, were in some lockdown last year. And I think the last one from the employee's perspective is the what's in it for me. I think people today are really looking for personalization. People are looking for health, well-being, mental health, well-being has become kind of the top of mind for everyone. So what does this mean now for employers? I think when you look at this from an employer perspective, well, how do we personalize the employee experience? How do we listen more to our employees? How do we get the best out of them, based on all these changes and these expectations we have changed? So I think there's a lot of things that have been happening, and we are only, I think, at the right beginning, at the start of the whole process.
Yeah.
Super.
Sure.
Look, I agree with everything you said there, Christian. Definitely 2023, has been a novel year. There's been a lot of uncertainty in the market. But one thing that I can say is, post-COVID, I think 2023 has been a year where we've seen the best adaptation to remote work flexibility, right? So we're seeing HR teams get very, very good at accommodating unique remote work models. There's a lot of flexibility now. We're seeing more tech being used to integrate into culture and drive culture, like through mediums like Slack, etc., and taking typical physical activities into the digital sphere. And obviously mental health support. A lot of people are working from home now. They don't have that camaraderie and connection that you get in the physical office. So we're seeing a lot of HR teams also begin to provide those type of mental support services to people that feel isolated. Another thing that's very important that we also see now is, now with a lot of free time and people kind of being in their own space, we're seeing a lot of people start to look at purpose-driven cultures in the companies that they work for, right? They are now demanding that personal values be aligned with the organizational goals, right? And if you're a recruiter or a company in this day and age, especially with this new generation of workers, you need to ensure that your purpose, your company's vision and mission is aligned to the people that you're working with. That has become very, very important. We're also seeing a lot of diversity, I think, and inclusion initiatives. So definitely there's a lot of more promotion for those in the typical minority sets, into positions of leadership, responsibility, and in this terms of uncertainty, right? There's a lot of people that are not able to switch jobs. There's also, like, I'll say, a slight decline in job availability. So we're seeing companies begin to promote more skills development, upskilling, right, and reskilling, to ensure that their teams, are either well equipped to do the jobs, or also motivated to remain, right, and not switch jobs. And finally, I have to use the word AI because that's a buzzword that everyone uses now. But AI actually has been also playing a big role. I think we're also seeing things like AI powered assessments, skills assessments coming into play. as well as hiring AI kind of powered events that employers use to find candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree with everything that both of you have said. From our perspective, especially on the AI front, we've seen a lot of employers and candidates alike require more value added to their experiences. So it's not just about, quick fixes really, although that's nice. For candidates, they want to learn during the process. So when they're looking for roles, or they're trying to find an employer that aligns with their values and what they really want out of life, they need to understand the culture, they need to understand career progression, they need to be able to be flexible, right? So because of COVID, everyone got used to working from home or working from a different country. So now people are, used to that way of life. And yes, while we can have hybrid working, I think it's important that we also recognize that work can be done from anywhere, as we've seen from COVID. And it really just depends on the culture, and that's what's really important nowadays. So I can say from like the millennial generation going downwards, they much more value their experience rather than monetary compensation, although that's always great. The two are really at par now. So whereas before we can debate and say that if the remuneration was great, that was enough to convince someone to take a job or a position somewhere, but now it's pretty much on par. It's the experience, it's the people, it's the opportunities for growth, it's all of that. So I think that's the big thing that we've learned this year from our perspective. And then another thing that we've seen that's been on the rise is the brain drain in Africa. So that's been ongoing for many years now, where people leave their home countries to chase brighter, bigger opportunities abroad, be it still in Africa, but in a more developed country, or overseas, so like in the States or in Australia or in Europe. But now we see a lot of companies wanting to attract that talent back into the continent. They've gotten their skills, they've gotten their experience, they have specialized skill sets, which can be of value to improve Africa as a continent. But they're struggling to convince them to move back. And it's not just about the competitive salaries that bigger organizations abroad offer, but it's also, I think, because of the cultural element as well. We found that a lot of African companies can be quite traditional in terms of their structure, in terms of their communication lines, that sort of thing. So what do you think African employers can do to convince or encourage African professionals abroad to come back home?
Well, I think, like you said, Tadi, it's a global phenomenon. I think it's been going on for a few years now. I think a lot of countries around the world are experiencing significant transitions in terms of demographical, the kind of how the population is evolving. And every country, I think, is very specific. I mean, I had a quick look at some of the latest statistics from the United Nations on world population. And not surprisingly, most African countries have a higher birth rate than death rate, meaning that across Africa, in most countries, the population is increasing. But at the same time, you're still experiencing that brain drain, and you're still struggling to attract those people back to home. I think this is a trend that's not going to change. Whether we look at it from an Africa continent perspective, I would probably I would tend to look at it from a country perspective. So just to share with you, we recently conducted a national employee engagement survey in Mauritius, and that was specifically at the back of the same question. So how do we address that issue. And I think to be able to address the issue, we need, first of all, to get reliable, accurate data at country level to be able to analyze the root causes. Because again, the root causes might be very different from country to country. So, but what we need is today we need to have accurate data, which I don't think we have. So we run this engagement survey this year in Mauritius. So we had about 300 companies who participated across 12 sectors. We had more than 21,000 employees who participated, and we basically worked with the local business community. And what came out from that study is basically some pointers in terms of how you can develop a country retention strategy. So rather than focus on attraction, focus on retaining. Because even as a company, you always trying to analyze your reasons for leaving. When you talk about retention, you look at reasons for leaving. Well, our research and our experience shows that the reason why people leave are not the reason why the people stay. And that's all over the world, across all sectors, it's the same. Most people will leave because of a high salary, but salary will not be one of the reasons why people stay. And I think it applies for companies, it applies for countries as well. So one of the some key pointers that I can share with you, I think some of the things that came up was in terms of the quality of the leadership. So people tend to be kind of put that as one of the high risk factors for leaving. So quality of the leadership, fairness and equity in the opportunities, not just in terms of rewards, but in terms of opportunities and growth. The quality of life is very much at the top of the list. So value for money for every citizen, for example, that comes as a very, very strong factor, and also the culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. So back of COVID, I think a lot of people have also started a business on the side, and they're also looking at, well, do we have the proper environment, ecosystem, facilities for us to develop a business? What happens if tomorrow we have another COVID? Do I have a fallback position if I lose my job? So these are kind of real questions that people have been asking. I think you've probably experienced this as well. A lot of people have started, side businesses, a small business on the side. So these are kind of some of the very, very top of the mind elements that come for me in terms of retention strategy at country level. And the other one, the last but not least one, would be, I think education has to be priority number one in every country. I mean, if you don't focus on education at the lowest level to the tertiary, you won't be able to prepare your workforce and make them future ready. I think when you look at many countries, I mean, Mauritius, I can probably talk a little bit more about Mauritius, but very similar to the rest of Africa is, well, what we're teaching our students at school, a lot of the subjects are probably not relevant anymore for the jobs that are going to become in 5 years' time. And we're still using our books from like 15, 20, 25 years ago. We're not using technology. When you have kids today at 5 years old who can use an iPad and very familiar with technology, we're still using very, very backward systems and frameworks. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to look at. But I think one thing which is for me the biggest opportunity for Africa is when we talk about what is the top reason why people leave. It's career opportunities. It's career growth. When you look at Africa, I think Africa has a tremendous opportunity because of your geographical spread. How can you leverage on that geographical spread and proximity to provide unique career opportunities, across countries, across regions, and this is probably very unique to Africa. And I don't think a lot of companies realize that potential or leveraging on that potential.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Christian, a lot of very good points there, and I like the focus because once this question was asked, I was like, we shouldn't be thinking about reversing the brain drain. I think we should be thinking about fostering a more conducive environment for talent development and retention, right? Because talent will go where talent is rewarded. It's supply and demand. If you're going to be rewarded abroad, that's where you will go because you have the skills to get that reward. So I think like you said, countries at the country level need to invest in the right frameworks and infrastructure to enable the environment be conducive for talent development and people wanting to actually be there and participate. There's nothing as great as being in your own country and doing your best work and being rewarded for it. Nothing beats that, right? So I think at a country level, we need to see more investment in education and skills development. Like you said, right from a primary up to a tertiary level. Also looking at the skills, the what do you call it, the rising skills, the new skills are coming into play, AI, in tech, etc. Being able to cultivate that and continuously train and develop your population in those areas. Then you also need to promote innovation, right, and entrepreneurship. So this is now a global economy. Like you said, a lot of people have started side jobs. So how do you make sure that momentum continues to grow and is fostered in your country so that people can actually develop side gigs in a local environment and be successful with it? You need to also make sure you're also able to give them access to funding. Africa has a big issue with credit. Why is it that a small or small business cannot access a decent amount of credit to be able to fund that side business? So we need to make sure those kind of frameworks are there. In some African countries as well, infrastructure and technology is not the best. So how do we just make sure people have access to high quality internet, high quality tools, and resources that they can use to grow? Then obviously the government needs to also play a big role in this. And all of the things that we've said are government driven, but there needs to be a very strong, I would say, initiative, an agenda from the government to say, look, we want people to be successful at home, and these are the things that we're doing, and these are the pathways that you can use to do this. In the UK, for example, there's the tech nation, right? The government has intentionally invested in a program that attracts tech talent into the country, right? So why we in Africa can also incorporate programs that allow people come back into Africa, bring their skill sets, get incentives, tax breaks, etc., to build businesses in Africa for Africans. So government must also play a big role in that. And two last things, you also mentioned people leave because of career growth, right? There's a lot of career growth that can happen locally, but I don't think we're showing enough stories of that. There's a lot of potential for people to develop themselves, skill-wise, position-wise, salary-wise, at local companies. We need to see more stories about that in the space. Then finally, one of the big reasons why people leave is because of quality of life. So if you're married and maybe you're going to have children, you want to raise your children in a place where they have access to quality education, quality hospitals, healthcare, just better quality of life, right? So how are we also improving that? Because money is not enough, right? If you want your family to be raised somewhere that is comfortable, is safe, etc., we need to work on that as well to make sure that it's attractive to high quality talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I agree with both of your points. Krishan, you mentioned how, career opportunities are very important nowadays in terms of reversing the brain drain. But Gabriel, you're also right in saying there aren't enough stories about it. We don't know a lot of stories of people who have progressed incredibly in their careers over the years. And I think if we shared more of those stories, or if those people shared those stories, people would be more encouraged and realize that, it's not an end all be all type of situation if they were to move back to Africa or just pursue their careers in Africa. And then, Gabriel, you also mentioned quality of life. And I think I can speak for myself and, my personal circle of friends. We all moved to the UK from, Zimbabwe, South Africa, even Kenya, Nigeria, just to be able to, have more comfort and, have that big city experience that we weren't really able to have back in our home countries. Also knowing that me as a Zimbabwean, there aren't that many opportunities right now or at the time when I was a graduate that was suitable for me. So I had to pursue a career abroad. But the goal is, of course, to go back to Zimbabwe and contribute to the development of the country, because that's so important. And you also mentioned, new skills in AI and, not really focusing on reversing the brain drain, but, making sure that we educate people and make our countries more conducive to make people not really even consider pursuing careers or even education outside of the country, because once they start pursuing education outside of the country, it's really difficult to then say, okay, after you're educated, come back. But if we foster that community within our own countries, make sure that what we're teaching people is up to date, is current, is relevant, I think that would go a long way in making sure that, we retain our talent and, just develop the continent as a whole. And so we've touched basically on how careers and work are evolving in terms of how AI is coming into play, how people like to work, but how else, and in more detail, how do you foresee careers and work evolving in 2024 and even beyond that?
Just coming back, I think, on the previous point, Taddy, when we talk about retention strategy is one thing, but I think we can also now start focusing on attraction strategy. So a lot of countries have developed strategies to attract tourists, to attract investors. So there's a lot of effort going into that. But I've yet to see an extremely good and impactful campaign on attracting talents back to a country. I haven't seen. There's probably some of them out there, but I haven't seen any. Why not? Because you should also be positioning yourself as a country as a best employer. I mean, what are the facilities that you're providing? And if you're talking to diaspora, these are the people who actually want to come back one day, but they're still hesitating or pushing it back and delaying until, with the hope that one day it will be better. I think we have all been in that situation where you say, well, yes, one day I will come back, but I don't know when. So why not next year? So the country has to make that effort to reassure you and to give you that comfort that, yes, we can provide you something close to what you're looking for. It will never be the same at what you can have in Europe, for sure. But being back home in your home country, close to your family and friends, it ticks a lot more boxes. But then the minimum that you need in terms of comfort and quality of life has to be there, right? So I think the attraction strategy, the unique selling point for a country, just like having a retention strategy. I mean, countries give a lot of benefits to returning residents. You have 10-year tax holidays and all sorts of benefits that you can have. I think there's a lot of work still to be done there. In terms of trends, I think 2024 and beyond, I think everything that we mentioned so far in terms of the pressures and the priorities are not going away. Some of them are actually going to accentuate. So when we talk about, I think the first of all, we're still a lot of uncertainty with respect to sustainability of business, medium to long term. So climate change, geopolitical conflicts, and what have you. I think this is not going away. The new ways of working, I think with technology and automation, this is going to even accentuate. We're just starting to find new sources of talent or creative way of upskilling and reskilling our internal resources, but I don't think that's going to be enough. We need to be a lot more resourceful, a lot more creative around where we're going to find these talents to ensure that our business is sustainable in the future. But I think I see more and more focus on engagement of our employees. So how do we keep them engaged and retain our employees? I think that's how businesses should be evolving in the future. I think that the trends everywhere, that all the research shows that you probably end up with close to 60% of employees working in a hybrid mode over the next 3 years, and that's for sure. People are more and more questioning the fairness of rewards. I think something that for many years was a kind of a given. People are now starting to question, well, how much am I really worth, and the value that I bring to the company, and what's in it for me. I think these are going to be more and more coming towards us as employers.
Yeah.
People want to be heard. I think the listening strategy is becoming more and more of a requirement, of a need for companies. And I think Gabriel mentioned it earlier, the mental health and well-being is gonna become even more important. I think we're gonna see whole new trends around mental health and well-being. People are starting to open up more and more about mental health and well-being. I can't imagine anyone talking about mental health 10 years ago in the workplace. That was such a taboo, and it still is. In a lot of companies, still very, very taboo, because we're still in that paradigm where we don't bring personal life at work, right? We're still in that paradigm. This is changing. I think the lines are getting blurred, very blurred, between what's personal and what's work. And I think mental health and well-being is going to be a very, very big topic, even more than diversity, actually, over the next few years.
Yeah.
You make a good point around the mental health aspect. I see it as merged, because your work is a significant amount of your daily life. So it actually contributes a lot to your mental health. And it affects how you are at home, how you are with friends, etc. So it's a very good point, Christian. I think that's going to be a big area going forward. For me, I think we're going to see a lot more of the hybrid work models develop, right? So it's not going away. So we're going to see a continued blend of this remote and on-site work, giving employees more flexibility and finding better ways to foster collaboration. Following on that, we're also going to now see a lot more remote leadership skills development, right? So now that you have a workforce that is not in a physical space with you, we need to make sure we're going to see a focus on getting managers to be able to manage teams in a remote setting. Another thing that I think we're going to see going into next year is an emphasis of skills over degrees, right? So there's a lot of new technology coming out. There's a lot of new skill sets, etc., that don't have degrees designed for it. There's a lot more certification, etc. So we're going to see a lot more emphasis on skills and adaptability, because things are moving very quickly. So the hiring processes or hiring requirements are going to be more tailored towards, do you have these skills? Are you certified in this area? As opposed to, did you study marketing in university? And finally, I think Christian mentioned this earlier, there's going to be a lot more support of freelancers and gig workers, right? So a lot of companies' budgets are getting tighter, HR budgets are getting tighter. So you're going to see a lot more companies try to get people on a project-based framework and just incorporate them into your talent strategy. So, if we need to do certain big projects, let's hire people on a contract base, set up for like maybe 6 months, 1 month, so that we don't have to deal with, the big HR budget implications going forward. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to be seeing going into next year.
Yeah. And I think this ties into the next question, which is, what will be some effective strategies to create positive employee experiences for employees going forward. And I know we've talked about, training and development. We've spoken about, making workplace environments, open enough for people to be comfortable to talk about mental health. And one of the audience members, Nicola, mentioned that usually in times of crisis or when there's other priorities, things like training and development or like these mental health initiatives that might have been started up tend to get pushed to the side, which I can speak on. During COVID, we saw a lot of employers putting a lot of emphasis on mental health, on, socializing as teams, just to bond and to foster relationships and to make sure that everyone was mentally okay. There seemed to be a little bit more emphasis on work-life balance, but as soon as COVID was over, slowly but surely, some companies or most companies have tended to drift back into their old ways and focusing on just purely work and, not fostering that same environment. So what can we do to keep these strategies going? And, even though they might not be beneficial in terms of, reaping rewards monetarily, instantaneously, what can we do to encourage employers to continue encouraging initiatives like this and, just keeping the employee experience the same consistently or getting better?
For me, three things. I think 3 points that I would probably mention here. The first one is, again, coming back to the listening strategy. I think people now, the workplace and the expectations from employees has changed dramatically, and people want to really feel part of an organization that is close to them and what they feel close with. Even if they're working remotely or in a hybrid mode, they also want to feel more connected to the workplace. This is new, and they're looking for that personalization of everything, of their own experience at work. So the only way that companies can keep that dialogue or conversation going is to have a continuous listening strategy. I mean, we do, we've seen a lot of demand, more and more demand in that space. The employee engagement surveys, for example, in Africa, it's picking up like really, really fast. It used to be a very US, UK, kind of Europe trend. We've seen a lot of demand now, more growing demand in that space. So we talk about surveys, we talk about pulse surveys, health checks on a regular basis, and that is something that's going to, I think, keep the momentum. The second point is around, we already mentioned that, and I think Gabriel also mentioned it, is the work. I mean, I think we need to redesign what we used to call a job or what we used to define as being work. We have to redesign it, what it means for us as a company, who is doing that work. It's not necessarily someone who is full-time or even part-time. It might be someone sitting anywhere in the world. It might be the freelancers. It might be anyone, as a subcontractor or a third party. What is important is the skill which is attached to this job. I think this is a trend which is already happening in some companies. Well, we're shifting more towards what we used to call traditional organization models, very hierarchical reporting lines and one-on-one reporting. We then move to the matrix type of organization. Now it's the skills-based organization. So what defines you is the skill that you bring in the company. This is the value that you get paid for. So what defines you is the skill and your set of skills or competencies, and this is what is going to become more and more the currency for you to go out there. You're not going to be applying for jobs. You're probably going to be selling your skills. That's already happening in the gig economy, by the way. It's been there for some time, because what you sell is what you know, is your skill. But that is going to now, I think, become a reality in our day-to-day. The skills-based organization is something that we we're going to see more and more. And I think the third one will be how we manage careers, and not just looking at careers as promotion. Promotion is not the only, the upward vertical mobility. People are also looking more and more at lateral mobility. So how can I move from marketing to HR? How can I move from HR to customer facing? People are looking for that type of career move, bold career move, but they want to get the guidance. And companies today, as we know, most companies are not properly structured to enable that type of movement within the organization because it's too rigid. So we need to evolve how we manage careers. We need to look at careers as ecosystems rather than just ladders. How do we move from point A to point B? We've been talking a lot about job grading, job evaluation, and putting boxes everywhere. That, I think, will have to change going forward. We need to be looking at careers in a more fluid type of way. How do we enable that structure, that model? Use of technology to do that. I think internal mobility programs. Many companies do not have an internal mobility. They advertise externally before advertising internally, and they do not promote internal talent enough. You can use technology to do that. Internal job portals, digital platforms where you can have access to the jobs, to openings and to vacancies, or even learn how to move from this job to that job. What skills do I need to learn? So I think these are all the things that will have to evolve and become, for that strategy and that momentum to keep going. And that ties all, with retention at the end of the day, because if you can't provide this in your company, people will go elsewhere.
Yeah. Great.
So yeah, look, if you're trying to improve your employee experience, I think definitely there's a couple of things that are important. First one is recognition and growth. So how are you acknowledging your achievements, from your team members? Are you providing them the right growth opportunities, like you said, to grow laterally or also vertically? Are you also not fostering that sense of belonging? All of these things are very important to ensure that the employee feels valued in the company. Second thing is, how inclusive is your decision-making process? So, like you said, Christian, we had this hierarchical structure in the past where very few people made decisions. But now, we're seeing with this new generation, especially, a lot more demand and desire to be involved in that process because they want to feel like they were part of that process and there's a shared ownership, in the objectives and the goals of the organization. So how do you involve people in that decision making process? Then I think thirdly is the learning and development empowerment. So kind of like tick the box training exercises are not enough. You need to have a personalized learning path, and in skills development, and you also need to give the individual that autonomy, right, for them to be able to shape their own growth. Because like you said, you might think that this guy was a marketing specialist. He wants to become a marketing manager. Maybe he wants to become a business development representative using his marketing skill sets to be able to sell. So how do you personalize that training pathway? How do you give that individual autonomy so that they can learn relevant skills that make them a more well-rounded candidate? So I think those three things are very important if you want to shape that employee experience. And then obviously we talked about the other two things, which is around like flexible work arrangements. So making sure people can work remotely, and that whole topic around well-being, mental well-being, so wellness programs, etc., work-life balance. Those things are also very important.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And then lastly, before we head into a Q&A, what is the key to successful performance management? I'll let you take the lead on this one.
So yeah, that's a interesting one. I think performance management as a process, as a system, has evolved so much over the years that we've lost a little bit of what is the real objective behind performance management? Why do we actually want to manage performance? And I think if I ask that question, I can get very, very different answers. But I think there is one answer specifically that we all are looking for ultimately is growth. The reason why we manage performance in any organization is not to pay a bonus at the end of the month, is to help that person grow. That's why it's done individually. That's why the team performance is also important. That's why the departmental performance is important, and the company performance at the end of the day. So first and foremost, the objective behind performance management is to help people grow. And when you help people grow, you will help obviously increase productivity. You will indirectly also increase the bottom line and profitability. Everyone is happy. So it's a win-win situation. So, and I think from experience, I can also tell you that there is no perfect performance management system. It doesn't exist, even with technology. I mean, the simplest performance management system that I know is a conversation between the line manager and the team member, focus around three things. One is, so how are you doing in terms of performance, personally and also professionally? Providing feedback, sharing feedback, not just from the line manager, but also the team member also having that opportunity to provide feedback to his or her line manager about what is working well and what can be improved. So it's a two-way conversation. And the third one is, well, so what's in it for me in the future? So how is this organization going to help me grow in terms of career? So what are my next steps? That's a conversation, and that's the simplest performance management system that I know. But we've obviously ended up now with very rigid, process-driven, box-ticking exercise in companies, which is completely misaligned with the core reason why we're doing it in the first place. So how do we make it successful? Well, I think 50% of the success depends on how the goals are set at the beginning. If the goals are not 100% clear from the start, there are 50% chances that the goals will not be met. So if from the start the employee is not 100% clear, not 99%, because if you're 90% clear about your objectives, there's 10% chance that you will succeed, you will fail. So I think we don't spend, as line managers, we don't spend enough time on discussing those objectives and making sure that there is clarity and it's mutually agreed. The regular checks, making adjustments along the way is important, and to have that appraisal conversation where we are really focused around the person. We can make it more sophisticated. Obviously, now we have stuff like 360 feedback, which helps a lot in the conversation. I think line managers can give better feedback. I don't think we are properly trained on how to give feedback as line managers. I don't think they are properly trained on how to receive even feedback. Some of them. I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow there. For me, how you would measure success of a performance management process is asking the employee how he or she feels at the end of the conversation. If they're feeling more positive coming out of that conversation, if they're feeling more positive and more motivated, it's a success. If they're feeling completely drained and demotivated because it wasn't a good experience for them, we failed.
Look, you're very right, Christian. Right? There's so many frameworks now, so many strategies to manage performance, but there's a couple of tenets that are very important, regardless of whatever tool you decide to use, right? And you mentioned one of them, which is clear goals an expectation. In any type of performance environment, either you're training for a marathon, you're trying to get fit, you need to have a clear goal and what the expectations are. So that is extremely important. And if you can go one step further, you need to try to align those goals to the individual's objectives, for his growth or his or her growth. So if you can align your company's goals with the individual's goals, that is nirvana, right? Second thing is once you have those goals, you need to continually communicate, right? So how regular are you checking in? How are you discussing this? Christian, you mentioned constructive feedback. How are you able to constructively communicate, your thoughts and your feedback around what the person is doing and how they're performing, right? And one way to do that very, very well is to use data, right? So I think a lot of the time feedback is very, very subjective as opposed to objective. So that's why if you have your clear goals and you have a target, once you're giving that feedback, you need to use your data to gauge, So if we agree that you're supposed to do X, Y, Z by this date, it's not there. This is what it's tracking like. It's supposed to be like this, but it's like this. What is the issue here? That is the basis of your feedback. That's what you should start your feedback from. Then I think finally the talent development plans, right? So, I mentioned this earlier. Um, for people to grow, they need to have something that's tailored to them, right? So most times the company's objectives might not really align with the individual's objectives. So that person is not really motivated to perform, right? Because there's no alignment. So you need to have very, very personalized talent development plans that allow the individual to grow at the same time supporting the company's objectives. So I think if you're able to do those things, everyone can go into that conversation with clarity. They can be satisfied with the objective feedback that they receive. And if they're performing well, they can see that performance in themselves as well as the company. And Christian, that question you asked, are you satisfied with that conversation? It's going to be answered positively because all of those things are aligned.
Amazing. Great insights. Well, I think that's been a great discussion so far. I think we have time for one question from our audience. We have a question from Grace, who is from Honoris United Universities, and she's interested in 2024 trends for talent sourcing from universities. And she asks, what technologies are being used in skills assessment during the recruitment process? Any insights from either of you?
So actually, we work with a brand called Interview Mocha. So this is a skills assessment company that have a catalog of skills assessments that is continually updated across different professions, different job functions, industries, etc. And you can integrate their services into your HR platforms, and you can administer these tests to your candidates as you try to recruit. So what we use it for on our platforms is it's used as a kind of filter or sorting mechanism. So for every candidate that applies, the relevant skills assessment is sent to those candidates, and the score is provided to the employer. So that employer has another kind of benchmark with which to rank and to sort applicants for the recruitment process.
Understood. Krishan, any additional comments?
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar. I think there's a variety of choice available in terms of those AI-powered interview platforms nowadays, where for different jobs, I think you are able to very quickly select, rather than going through 50 candidates, you can actually use AI today to kind of do that filtering and selection at the start. So you can use case studies, you can use even some short tests. If you're recruiting, for example, for a software developer, for example, you can have specifically designed online tests, which is run by an AI. engine at the back where you can quickly, test the proficiency of these people. So there's, I think, psychometric assessments have been there for many years. We particularly, and I use a lot of the SHL tests, which are quite quite good for, especially for leadership positions. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the skills. I think coming back to the point that we were raising earlier, we're going to be become more and more focused on measuring skills.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one interesting sort of skill assessment that I've seen is a lot of companies are implementing gamification just to make it more exciting or challenging, but in a good way to encourage competitiveness, and also just to filter out that first layer of applicants as well. So like things like aptitude tests, but they implement it in a fun way. You can download an app and do it that way. Or some companies just implement AI in, so for example, on our platform, when a candidate is applying for a role, they can run a match report, and that analyzes all their skills in their CVs and puts it up against the requirements of the job that are outlined in the job description, and then they're scored against that. So then if they achieve above a certain score, then they're able to proceed and apply for the role. But if not, they'll just be explained to why. So they'll be told, oh, while you have this skill set, you are lacking in this area and in this area, and you can improve by doing this and this. So it just depends on the organization, the kind of skills they want to test. But as Krishan and Gabriel said, there's many options that are out there. It just depends on the specific talent and the skill set that you're looking for. I think that's the end of our time. I think we should just make some closing statements. If there's any additional questions from the audience, please feel free to comment them still, and I will relay them back to Krishan and Gabriel and reply back on your comment at a later stage, whether that's tomorrow or in a few weeks. So Krishan, Gabriel, do you have any closing statements you would like to give?
No, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Tadi. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you to Global Career Company as well for the opportunity. And I think we've tried to share some of our experience and insights. It's very exciting. The times ahead, I think, are very exciting. I don't think we have ever experienced such a exciting period of time where we are able to really be creative, challenge ourselves, and have so much things around us that are inspiring to keep going and to keep improving. So thank you to all, and yeah, let's keep growing.
Great, thank you, Krishan.
Super. So yeah, thank you all for joining the audience. Really appreciate you taking the time out here. The Global Career Company, thank you for this. Tadi, Christian, wonderful conversation. I won't say much. I would, maybe put a word out to both candidates and to employers. So to candidates, if you're a candidate, focus on your skills. Try your best to develop your skills. Have as much of a catalog of skills as possible, because that's where things are going. It's going to be a huge focus on your skills and your ability to do certain things. Then for employers, I would say manage with empathy, right? It's a tough time across the employment space. Salaries are not going up, inflation is crazy, etc. Manage with empathy. People are working from home. It's mental health issues. Manage your teams with empathy. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Thank you Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Krishan. From me and from GCC, thank you to everyone for joining this webinar. Thank you to Krishan and Gabriel for joining me this morning. I will say after this webinar, we will send out some information on our 2024 webinar program. We've got some really exciting conversations that are coming up next year. We touched on a lot about the future of work. So a lot of those key takeaways from this conversation will be focused on in our webinars for next year, speaking about AI, flexible working, how to manage with empathy, those sort of things. So stay tuned and you should receive those in your inboxes. But yeah, once again, thank you so much. And we wish you an enjoyable rest of your day and weekend ahead.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.